He's Howard Eibach, former copywriter and creative director and the author of 2 books on the creative brief.
And he's Henry Gomez, an ad agency strategist with 28 years of experience. Together, Henry and I are the Brief Brothers. We love talking about advertising, creative briefs, and briefing. Today, Henry, we're back with part 2 of our series with Ben Levy, who is a guru, an amazing guru in the area of teaching creatives and agencies how to present and sell their work. Let's listen to part 2. Okay. So what are some of the most common questions that come to you when you do your training? And I'm going to guess, do you do your training virtually, in person, a mix of both? And what's the most common of the two that you do?
Mix of both, and virtual is still the most common, although as we get further away from shutdown, in person is starting to pick up more and more speed.
So what are the most common questions that you get from the participants themselves? In other words, I'm going to guess it's going to be the creatives, the copywriters, the art directors,
Yep.
the creative directors, the people who are going to be in the room.
Yeah.
And what kind of question, and let's start there, because I also want to ask you what kind of questions you get from the people who reach out to you, who may not be the people who are going to actually get the training. That's what it's like for me. I often work with their continuing education persons or the head of training.
Right.
So they don't actually do the training, but they're speaking on behalf of the people who want the training. So the people in the room usually ask you what kind of questions?
The people in the room usually come with a knowledge of some mistakes that are being made. They don't know what to do instead. So I have this sign behind me, I stop reading slides. Everybody goes, yeah, I know, I'm not supposed to read the slides. No one tells you what to do instead, though. I mean, they're right there. What else? I'm gonna read them. So that's a big one. Is I say too much. I know I need to stop doing that. I don't know how.
Like you said, what to do instead?
Yeah. So usually, if I'm talking to someone who's going to take the training or somebody who's been thrown into the training by their supervisors, it's okay, here are the things that I know are wrong, but I just don't know what the alternative is. And everywhere they look, they see the same thing, because these mistakes are very, very common. When I'm talking to somebody who wants to hire me on behalf of their team, it's interesting because the biggest concern is, how will you get through to them? How will you help them? And sometimes, and these are some of my favorite people to work for and with, they'll be concerned that their team is going to see this as an attack on their abilities, which I fully understand. There's got to be a few things more awkward than getting told you have to meet with some bald dude with glasses about your presentation skills. And that's as much as you get before the meeting starts.
Next time they ask you, how do you going to get through them? You ask them, have you ever seen Alec Baldwin scene in Glengarry Glen Ross? That's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna come in and
It's just like that.
I'm gonna take off my watch and say, this watch costs more than all you made last year.
That's right. You see this watch?
I have to go. I got to watch that movie, and I haven't seen that movie in a long, long time. And that's interesting because I teach for the ANA. I don't do this on my own. I teach a workshop that turned out to be very popular on public speaking. But what I teach is improv, so that people get comfortable just being up on stage. And one of the things we talk about, is how do you get over the nerves? And what you're saying essentially is a huge part of what you're teaching is just being comfortable talking off the top of the cuff. You're not really reading, you're not giving a speech, although it is a speech. You're not reading from cue cards. You're not reading it. You're not delivering a speech. You have to be able to read the audience, read their body language, which is harder to do online than it is in person.
Absolutely.
So, that's why I love using improv, because it gets people out of their heads and gets them right there in the moment. And one of the things we talk about is, how do you get rid of the fillers? I could tell instantly within the first 30 seconds of talking to you that you've mastered that ability to rather than say, well, you just stop and don't say anything. Silence is not your enemy. Silence is your friend.
I think that's a big one. Like, people don't like to speak in a paused manner. They're afraid of leaving blank airspace out there.
But that's
Right.
what keeps the attention on you, is if you stop and say, I have something I want to share with you.
But now that's a whole,
I've got your
but
attention.
but Howard, you're already at level 3 there because people don't want the attention on them.
Yeah, I know.
Something else that I talk about is you come to a meeting, particularly a virtual meeting, and the first thing you do is share screen. Not even everyone's in the room yet. You share those slides because you want to get your face off screen. You want to hide yourself.
You
And
haven't been to
so
one of
many
my
people
online workshops, Ben. I'm a bit of a ham, so it's like I'm not
no, no,
afraid of
no.
that.
I'm not saying you,
I understand. I
but
understand.
this is one of
The
those other
psychology
behaviors
of the people that need this training.
Right. Yeah, there's
right
a
that
little
that I
clip.
don't want to be, I don't want it to be on my shoulders.
Yeah,
That's why
there's
I
a
overwrote the deck. That's why I'm sharing this slide and hiding behind it. And that's why I don't want to pause. It draws attention to me.
yeah,
That's terrifying.
there's a famous clip from oh what's his name? He did that the famous sitcom about nothing. What's his name?
Oh, Seinfeld.
Seinfeld.
Seinfeld. There's a little clip that I
Yeah.
used at the beginning of my workshop on public speaking. He said, I saw a poll the other day that said that people would rather when they go to a funeral, they would rather be in the coffin than have to deliver the eulogy
Right.
because they're
That
afraid of public speaking.
the number one fear is public speaking. The number two fear is death, which
Yeah, I
means
blew
people
the
would rather be in the casket than
that
giving
then
the
then
eulogy. Yeah.
delivering. I blew
Yeah.
the joke, but that's the point. People are just so terrified of public speaking. And that's the truth that we
They
all
are.
have to overcome. We all have to overcome that
They
if you're
are.
going to present creative. Yeah.
But
So
again,
you mentioned
I think there is small or a small percentage of people who I think most of us become enamored with public speaking over time as we do it, right? Like when we figure
yeah.
out we're kind of good at it, we like it. It's a loop. It's a reinforcement loop that we have that we did well. Now we want to do well again, and it's in the endorphin rush. There's certain people again that have a skill that they have an uncanny ability and they have a desire. They're not afraid of public. They want these are the people that sing and dance, right? Are not
Right.
afraid
Yeah.
to to perform in front of people. A lot of times been doing it since they were very young. And so commanding attention for them is something that they get a rise out of. But to your point, I think one of the issues is that a lot of creatives are introverts, right? They're right
Absolutely.
brain people, they're introverted, they're not necessarily outgoing, gregarious people. Those a lot of times are the really good account people, right? The ones that wine and dine and remember the
Yeah.
client's birthday and send them the basket. And oh my God, I heard about your son going off to Iraq. They have that external, they're living more of that life where extroverted life where creatives can be, not all of them, but can be very introverted.
And so it's interesting because one of the ways in which I don't want to say differ from public speaking coaches, but a different focus that I have is that I am not trying to get people to speak at a set pace or for a set tone. And I say this all the time to people who come to me. They say, I'm an introvert. I don't like being up there. So look, I don't care how you speak naturally. If your range is super narrow as an introvert, I just want to make sure you use all of it. If you're a more extroverted person like I am, I want to make sure you use all of that. If I narrowed my range, I would sound like something was wrong. I would be holding myself back. I would be restricted. And the client in some level would understand that. And they would wonder, what is this guy hiding? Why is this so weird right now? Conversely, if somebody who's an introvert tries to go large, they sound like a cartoon character. And now the client is going, this is a performance. You're lying to me. You're not as excited about this as you could be because this is not what you sound like when you're
I've
excited.
seen examples of both.
Yeah. Me
And
too.
and so it's for me because listen, if we were great actors, we'd be getting Academy Awards, not Cannes Lions. Don't try for both in the same meeting, right? Just figure out how to be comfortable as yourself. People say to me all the time, I'm such a fast speaker. I speak way too quickly. So do I. You know what the answer to that is? It's not slow down, it's pause more frequently. I'm a super fast speaker. I also take very long pauses. If I spoke like this the whole time and didn't take a pause, yeah, you'd be exhausted because your brain can't catch up to any of it. You don't know what you're saying. I don't even know what I'm saying right now. But it's not the pace. There's no
Well,
difference in the pace.
Clearly
the-
what you're talking about is more than just speaking techniques. There are other things that you're going to be sharing. And I don't want you to just lay it all out for us here because that's your proprietary information. But can you give us a sense of, maybe one or two things that you can share that kind of give us the aura of how we can become better presenters?
Absolutely. So let me start by telling you the three areas that I think are necessary to master to become really great at a creative presentation. The first is going to be story structure.
Hmm.
What is it you want to say? And we do a really bad job of that. We cram in everything in the kitchen sink. So story structure is the first focus. The second is delivery. How do you tell that story? And it's a lot of what we've been talking about in terms of slides and how you use your voice and the pauses. And then the last thing people talk about very rarely, which is part of why I enjoy it so much, and that's adaptability. When everything goes wrong, so the whole meeting starts going sideways, how do you keep it going forward? And I'll give you an example in each of those things that you can do to become more persuasive in your next meeting. So when it comes to story structure, we talked about this a little bit already, is trying to cut all of that stuff in the beginning, that fluff that we don't necessarily need. One of the things that I will do frequently is I will start with a black slide and I just talk. And it puts that focus on me and it breaks from the idea that the meeting is the same as all the other meetings they had. Like, this is different. Right? Maybe you have to put a cover slide on it because otherwise you're not going to be able to keep track of it with your other files. Fine. But when you put those slides up, start on slide 2. Right?
Black slide.
Just a black slide that lets you start the meeting rather than them reading ahead and looking at all the stuff that you haven't yet set the tone for. Or a full bleed image that inspires a question or some interest, or a single statement that'll do the same. I have a presentation I give about the right and wrong way to use slides. And the first slide of that presentation is a full bleed image of the DeLorean from Back to the Future with flames coming out the back. Nobody knows why the hell that's up there. This is not the meeting they thought they were coming to. I immediately have more of their attention than I would otherwise. So like we were talking about before with that first frame, think of how to start your meeting in a way that relates to the work, is significant to your audience, but also intrigues them, hooks them. And story structure is where that starts. When it comes to delivery, get the client talking. Not just with, I want this to be a conversation, please do. Plan questions within your presentation. Figure out,
Questions for
here's a
them.
place for them, exactly. Here's a place where I want to talk about the nostalgia play for this brand. Well, before I bring up that insight, I'm going to ask them a question about their favorite memory from their childhood.
Mm.
Something that, again, what do we talk about with great work? It's emotional. When was the last time you felt like your presentation was truly emotional? But that's what's persuasive. We know that emotion is what causes people to buy. So create questions, put them in the deck, put the question right on the slide if you need to, so you don't forget it, and get the client to answer it. Don't give them a pass. Don't turn it into a rhetorical. Create that back and forth.
I'm
And if you
smiling.
can do that,
I'm smiling because I was just like, I just had like a flashback memory from, I don't know, 4 agencies ago. We were talking about emotional. We were pitching Babies R Us, which was part of Toys R Us, right? It was like where you would get it, and we were pitching them for Hispanic. And so we did this. We went up there to their headquarters. We gave this presentation, and the creative director was a new dad at the time, and so he was very close to this.
what
And
a gift. Yeah.
we had this we had this radio spots, and this is a guy reading in the voice, trying to, the expectant mom. And the radio spot was the pregnant mom talking to her unborn child. and the client was a table full of women. By the end, they were sobbing,
Yeah.
and
Yep.
that was one. I mean, it's off topic because it was well, I think it was partially because of the presentation, because he was this guy, a really jolly looking, kind of overweight guy who had just explained how he was a new father or whatever and how he could relate to it. And then he reads this really, really emotionally touching. And the women, and I remember we were pitching for the Hispanic business. The lead client said, "This is how all our advertising should be." And I'm like, "We got this. We won." And of course
Yeah.
we did win.
Yeah. And, you know, it's so funny. I was in a room where I had one of the people from this first cohort presenting scripts, and they made the client cry. And we had two sets of scripts. We presented the ones that we wanted to do first. And the client is crying, and I think they said something like, "This is the most important work we could ever make. We must make this." And thank you very much. We feel the same, as I'm sliding the other set of scripts into my bag. And the art director who'd worked on that second set leans over and whispers, "Are we going to show them the other ones?" And I said, "When the client cries, you hand them a tissue and you leave." That's
Thank you, Zach.
we're good.
Which
Take
We're
yes for an
good.
answer.
you haven't answered fully the previous question, but so I want to park a question for now, which
Yeah.
is how many concepts is the right amount, and how many is too many? But we'll get
Let's
to
get
that in
into
a
it. Let's get
second.
into it.
But
Okay. So
you
the
were,
last piece,
yeah.
yeah, the last piece is adaptability. And there's this came to me in the most visceral way possible when I presented work. We've all heard 100 times, the client will never buy that. But one day I had an ECD who looked at me and said, "Okay, and what are you going to do when the client says no?" And that changed my life, because he was allowing me to take this work into the room. He was also warning me there was no way in hell that they were going to take it without a fight. If I wanted to get them to buy this work, I had to prove that it was the work they should buy. And sometimes that means looking at the client and saying, "I don't know." They may ask you a question you don't have the answer to. And I have seen people lie through their teeth
Yeah, big
reflexively.
mistake.
They
Yeah.
panic and they just shoot an answer out, and because they worry that they lose credibility when they say, "I don't know." So here's the adaptability piece that I'll share with everybody today. You say, "I don't know," but there's a comma after it.
Mm-hmm.
And the next thing you say is, "But
But
I
I'll
will
find out.
find out."
Yeah.
But I'll find out. And now you maintain your credibility because you are the source. You don't have to know everything in the world. They just have to be able to rely on you to get the answers they need.
Yeah.
The founder of our
I'm gonna go figure it out.
the founder of our agency is in the Advertising Hall of Fame. And she famously said she got her first job in advertising. She was a high school graduate. She was interviewing for a secretary job, and she had just failed an interview with an insurance company. And she gets to the ad agency, didn't know anything about advertising. They asked her, "Do you know how to do this? Do you know how to do that?" And she says, every answer, I said, "I don't know, but I'll learn. I don't know, but I'll learn." So similar,
Yeah.
Yeah.
parallel.
Yeah, I learned that
Yeah.
lesson from a United States senator. I was this kind of a know-it-all teenager who won an opportunity to go to Washington, D.C., and I got an appointment to see he was the junior senator from Wisconsin, Bill Proxmire, which is a name that some may know, some may not know.
William Proxmire, yeah.
Yeah. And two or three of my high school buddies and I were sitting in his office, and I was going to see if I could catch him with something he didn't
Yeah.
know. I was asking, I'd done some deep reading on a particular issue in foreign policy, and I asked him this tough question. He looked at me and he said, "I don't know. Let me ask one of my assistants." And he actually called in an assistant, and he said, "I don't know that either. Let me find out." It's like, holy crap! A
And we
politician says, "I don't know."
And by
Yeah.
the way,
Yeah.
people do it in social settings all the time. Like they'll say, "Oh, have you heard of so and so?" And you've never heard of that person. And for some reason, some people have this reflex of, "Yeah, yeah, I know." I'm always like,
Uh-huh.
"No, what is that?" Because I
Yeah,
want to
tell
know
me.
what it
Right.
is. Like if there's
Yeah,
something I don't
Right.
know that is in the pop culture or whatever it is, whatever I don't want, first of all, I don't want to be fake and say that I know something that I don't know. And secondly, if I don't know it, I want them to tell me what it is and why it's
Yeah.
important.
Yeah, absolutely.
But we're our
Well,
own worst enemies.
I think Henry asked a really good question because, we've talked about this thing, how many concepts do you show? It was always an issue that I had when I was a creative director talking with my staff and my
Yep.
bosses, and also asking the client, what are you expecting? So what is generally your advice if you have some in that area?
So when it comes to how many examples you should show, how many campaigns, how many concepts,
Options, yeah.
options, right? The the answer is as many as it takes to show them what you think they should do. And let me break that down in a more meaningful way. The thing that I hate, and clients hate it too, they've told me, is when an agency goes, here's 3 directions, and they're 1, 2, 3. What am I supposed to do with this? We spend all this time talking about the curse of knowledge and about how clients do not know as much as we do and how this work is brand new to them. We've been overthinking it for days, weeks, months. When you show multiple concepts, you need to explain how they should be thinking about those concepts, how they're different. Here's concept A. This is using your current voice and your current media spend. Here's concept B, and we wanted to show you what would happen if we took the budget and we spent it on a street level execution. We think that there's an opportunity to do something like this, and the organic growth could be way better. And then here's option C, and it's using the general media channels that you would expect. We just took a little bit of wit and injected it into your normal brand voice because we think this concept calls for it, and we want to see how you feel about it. Now they understand why these concepts, why these options exist on the plate. It's not, do you prefer red, green, or blue? It's, well, are we most comfortable with the voice and the media that we've done before? Or do we think there's an opportunity here with a different channel? Or do we want to try and explore our voice? And now they're judging the creative on the merits that you want them to think about, rather than looking at it and going, I
What
like
what
that one.
what about a smaller kind of, I don't even want to call it a campaign,
Yeah.
where it's just we need a new ad for this sale. It's not a Christmas sale. It's not one of the big seasonal. It's just we're having the special sale. It's going to last for a week. So
Yep.
we just need some new concepts. And the team comes up with 3 unique approaches, but they're not quite, we're not going to re-swizzle the spend. We're not going to re-swizzle the experience versus print versus,
But I think but I think
But
the
they're,
principle stands because
yes.
you have
I
to
think so. Okay.
yeah, because why would I choose one over the other? So I
Right.
think that each one needs to have a reason for existing, otherwise it shouldn't exist.
Okay, well, let me back up and challenge you on that because I worked at British Airways as creative director in their 4 loyalty programs way back in the
Uh-huh.
day when I was, and we would often have we have a new mileage campaign that's coming up. We want to reach out to our best flyers because we got the special deal to London, and
Yep.
it's extra, 2 times the miles rather than 1 times or whatever it happens to be.
So I think
And it's
direct
and
marketing
hang,
is a clear exception
yeah, it
because you're
is.
using A/B testing and you're testing minuscule variables against each
Right.
other.
So I'm presenting, but I'm still presenting ideas.
Yeah.
It's just it's not necessarily we're going to do we're going to do an A/B split with different lists or different offers. It is going to be an idea driven thing, but it's not as big.
And it
It's a
doesn't,
smaller.
right. And it doesn't have to be. Like Henry was saying, those changes were still made for a reason. I don't care if you're just showing them 3 executions that have 3 different point sizes to them, then that's the reason why there's 3 different ones here.
Or
This is a
it could just
smaller
be
one, so we
3.
think more gets above the fold. This one is a little bit larger. This is the biggest if you just want to have the headline here and not and everything else comes underneath.
It could be 3 identical layouts with 3 just different
Mhm.
ideas. So
Yeah.
it's
Yeah,
just a
so
matter
right.
of
Listen,
If the
it's just a
line
matter.
is just different, the colors are
Howard,
different.
you've been willing to say when you've been beaten. I'm willing to admit, I think that in direct marketing and in certain types of controlled environments, you're changing variables to get better performance, but there's already a brand tone. There's already
Yeah,
like very
yeah.
strict graphic guidelines that you're going to follow or whatever. So we're changing the typeface, we're changing the font, we're changing the image to see which one does better. But generally, when we're talking about like creative ad, like if we're talking about magazine ad A versus brand magazine ad B, you know, one is, do we want to try sense of humor? Do we want to use I don't know, I'm making it up,
Celebrity
animation
endorsement.
rather than photography?
Yeah.
Because that's it. So each one kind of fulfills a different role. And by the way, each approach is going to have a strengths and weaknesses, and it's a question of which strengths override the weaknesses and where's the client psychology at. But I want to get back to the question about the number, because I think a lot of people have this idea of 3 as the magic number, which
Well, but I think we're also getting to this notion. We've heard the stories about the agency that comes in with chutzpah and says, here's your idea, take it or leave it. Now, maybe they
Right.
don't do it quite so rudely, although maybe
Right.
they do. But we have heard these stories where maybe it's a Crispin, maybe it's a Droga 5, maybe it's this big hot shop where the senior guy, the name on the door, comes in and says, we scribbled some ideas on a back of an envelope. This is brilliant. Here it is. I mean, even Ogilvy kind of did that. There's a story about Ogilvy saying, do you want my best thinking or do you want my second best thinking?
Yeah,
Right.
he said it's okay, you don't like my best idea, here's my second best idea. But I think he would only whip out the second best idea if the client rejected what he presented and had rejected.
So do
And I
you
think
ever recommend just showing one idea, Ben?
I think that I would not recommend showing just one idea unless you know that the client is understanding of what you're doing, right? There are clients who understand the creative process to the degree where they get, you made a judgment call here, you believe this is the work, you're putting yourself behind it. Okay. But I've been in rooms where we showed one thing and the client didn't understand that and they were insulted. They thought this was representative of how much work we'd done.
I could think of a few exceptions where you could take one idea. One is if you're bringing a proactive, something that they're not expecting,
definitely.
and you're saying, look, we have this idea, what do you think?
Yeah.
The second one is if, frankly, you look at the ideas in the cold light of day and everything you've generated is shit except for one idea, and then you could go to them and say, look, we threw around a lot of stuff and here's where we landed. If this isn't it, we need more time, and we go back and we could do some more work on it, have other people look at it or whatever. So I think, but which gets to a point that I wanted to make. I think that when and the huge this happens with creative directors I've worked with, people I like and admire, but sometimes it makes me want to pull my hair out, is getting to the arbitrary number of 3. You end up with a really good idea, and a piece of filler because you needed 10 tracks on the album. That's horseshit.
Nope. No,
like
I would rather straw dogs. Straw dogs get taken out behind the barn.
I'd rather take the good idea and the really good idea and leave the filler track that rounds out the album behind.
I don't present anything I don't want to make.
Oh,
there's some things. There's some. I mean, we say it's a given.
It happens all the time.
We've all been in that room. It's constantly. Well, so and so made me do this one. Well, this is what we think the client wants. But do you want it? No, but that's what they're expecting. Well, get it the hell out of here. We'll bring it back in round 2.
Well, I can say with complete honesty that I've never presented an idea, and I've almost always done 3 ideas. But as creative director, I've never presented or asked my team to present an idea they didn't want to do.
You're in
I'm the same way, but I've been in the.
It happens way more often than you.
I'm sure. I don't doubt. You're absolutely right.
And then you know, as we go down the list of Henry creative press, because I'm a strategist, right? And so I can advise, I can cajole, I can, you know, try to help the creatives, but you know, I've got a 27-year career too, and I've been, you know, sitting in meetings where clients have loved the presentation, and I've seen meetings where we've bombed. And a lot of times when we bombed, it's been self-inflicted. As I heard the phrase yesterday coined, ballistic podiatry, shooting yourself in the foot. Okay.
I like that.
I like that.
I'm gonna take that.
Me too.
one of them is presenting way too many concepts, like to the point like where they don't
Absolutely.
even remember the first one that you went through. They're
Mm-hmm.
kind of lost at the end of the presentation. They're like taken aback. You have a 45-minute window and you're going to get 5 creative concepts. Like, give me a friggin' break. And usually, as another pet peeve of mine, it's for political reasons, right? So and so creative had this idea. This was the best idea they had, even though it's the 5th best idea that we have. And I don't want them to feel left out. Like, I'm like, sorry, creative director, that's your job. Your job,
Yeah, that's a
the most important thing a creative director does, or one of the most, is to cut the bad ideas.
Yeah.
Um,
yeah,
the other
that's a
thing,
failure. That's a failure of leadership right there. That's
yeah,
somebody who doesn't understand the job of a
Well,
CD.
that leads to another really interesting question, Ben. Where do you get the most pushback? Where someone says, "Are you kidding? Is that really what you're telling us to do?" Does that happen?
Oh yeah, all the time. The first time that I took all the words off the slide, I mean, I did no words in my presentation. I had an account person come up to me in a flop sweat panic. Ben, there's no words on the slide. Yeah, I know. Were you going to put words on? I wasn't thinking about it. What do you think? Yeah, can we have some? I mean, they're what if they leave the deck? What if it gets shared around? And I had a whole conversation. Here's my rationale. I want them to ask me questions. That's why I'm there. Otherwise, this could be an email. And I get through the whole thing, and he says, "Okay, no, I believe you. Could you just could we get like one line on each thing?" And I said, "Sure, I'll give each slide a caption." And in like 8-point type at the bottom of the slide, I put essentially a headline, right? Nobody could read it. Nobody even knew it was there when I was presenting. So the pushback happens all the time. It usually comes from account, and I don't want people to misunderstand and think that this is a creative versus account thing because I hate that cliche. It usually comes from account because they're furthest away from the presentation as it's
Mm,
getting made.
mm,
So it's a surprise to them, right? There might have been arguments up front within the creative department about how we want to reduce as much copy from the slides as we want, or we want to start asking questions. There might have been some conversation with strategy then, hey, this is what we're hoping to do in the second half of the deck. Can your upfront alter a little bit to match that? Poor account always gets the notice last. And so here's the person who feels personally responsible for the relationship, and you just told them that what their client's going to see is something completely unexpected. So that's where a lot of that pushback comes from.
but
That's
you
where a
also,
lot of the panic is as well with the questions.
but you
Like if
mm.
also, go ahead.
I
I'm
was just
sorry.
going to say, if you want to ask these questions and hope the client is going to respond, you better warn everybody else in that meeting because the second that there's silence,
Yeah, someone's
someone
gonna
else
jump
is going
in.
to jump on what they think is a grenade, and you're like, no, no, I want them talking.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. No,
yeah,
I think, but you mentioned in that description of the account person panicking, something which I think is the other side of this, which is the client themselves. The, what's the client going to email around to the people that aren't in the meeting? Well, you know what? The stakeholders that have to approve this advertising should find the time in their calendar to be in the meeting where their creative agency that they're paying millions of dollars to a year is presenting the work that they're buying. Like, is it
So
too
I
much to ask that people be present in the room in a meeting for stuff that they're actually buying?
or even on Zoom.
is it too much to ask? Apparently, because it seems not to happen as much as it should. So here's my solution for that. Because a lot of what I do and a lot of the coaching that I do with people is about the ideal versus reality, right? I'm a working creative. I've been in these meetings too. I understand. I
A
can tell
recurring
you, for
theme of the Brief
example,
Brothers, by the way, from the first episode
I
Yeah,
is
can I can I can tell you, for example, that the best thing for you to do is to make 2 decks, one for presenting and one for emailing. Because if you have a deck that makes perfect sense when it's emailed on its own, there's literally no reason for me to be there presenting it. It has everything it needs. You don't need me.
that's how you
So
get
it's going to
reading from slides.
yeah,
exactly. It's going to upstage me at every turn.
yeah.
And then people go, I barely got this deck done in time. How do you expect me to make 2? And I have systems that make it very, very, time whatever the opposite of time intensive
One
is. I
is you
write
could
words for a living. I can't figure it out.
one is
But
you could do it the old way and then remove all the save a copy and then remove all of the
so
wording
that's
from.
right. So when I tell people to do 2 slides, that's what I tell them to do is you write the leave behind deck first, the emailed one first, and then you just take the headline off each slide and you blow it up if that's the point. Or you take the image and you make it full bleed if that's the point, and that's the one you present. But people will still say, I don't have time, or my boss has this template that we have to use. What do I do? So here's the middle ground is you create a slide deck that has all of that information, collapse the overwritten slides. So when you present, they're not there.
Okay.
Then you
Yeah.
expand them and send it
You have
over.
hidden slides.
You have hidden slides.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
So now there's no slide that exists on its own. You have the slide that has all of the copy on it that's exhaustive. But before that, you have a prelude slide that just has the headline or the insight for the idea or whatever it is that you're going to present.
Smart.
Well,
you show that and not the second.
My rule of thumb, and I do different kinds of slide presentations than you do, but I don't have any slide that I have that has more than 15 words on it is a handout.
Yeah.
Now
So
you
my
can't. Now
rule,
that's not going to necessarily work in what you're in your context. But from my context, most of my slides are either just a photograph, and then I talk about what the photograph refers to, or it's
Yep.
got a single sentence, which is I can reiterate in any way. But if it's got a chart, if it's got a lot of copy, then I'm going to hand it out. So I teach a workshop on how to write a creative brief. So I'll put a creative brief up on the slide, which is often too small to look at on the screen anyway.
Right.
Guess what?
Right.
It's in the workbook. So, but now that leads me to my next question. You get pushback from account folks. You get a pushback on occasion from someone who's putting the deck together. What kind of pushback do you get from the creatives who are going to be there standing up and selling their work? What is it that you say to them that they go, "Are you nuts?"
One of the things that always comes up, I tell them, get all the words off the slide, and they go, but I'm going to forget what I want to say.
Mm-hmm.
Or, and this one really
rehearsal.
kills them, I say, get all the words off the slide, and they go, oh, so then I should just put it all in the notes, right? And I go, no notes. Don't use notes. Then they start panicking. They'll log off the Zoom. They'll run and hide under a bed. They can't take it. So the problem with having those words either on the slide or below the slide are that even if you're doing a perfect job, having those words there means you're going to check them to make sure that you're doing a perfect job.
Yeah.
And that is eroding your credibility every time you do it. I'm talking to you, you ask me a question, and before I answer, I do this. And I glance off to the side. Right? That happens over and over again. You know what's going on. Oh, he's not here with me. We're not having a conversation. You're reading notes.
So the way I kind of approach it, right, when you're trying to be minimalist in your presentation is what you're putting on the screen should somehow be a stimulus to what you want to say.
Right.
It should trigger in your mind the pre-rehearsed story, and it should be your story because it's your friggin' idea, right? So
absolutely,
there's no reason for you to feel like if I asked you what was your childhood like, you don't need notes for that. You know what your childhood was like, right? So this is your idea. This is the baby that you gave birth to. You just need to, I want to say this about that thing. And next slide reminds you that I want to say this about that thing. Comedians have little note cards they put on the stool. It's just one word that tells them, reminds them, this joke leads to that joke, leads to that. The story, they already have it in their head.
Right.
They don't need to look at a script. They just need to, if they kind of lose track, they can look down and see the one word that says, oh, that's how I go from this story to that story.
100%. So what I tell people is everyone sees my notes. They're my slides.
Well,
that's what dictates what goes on my slide. If it is so important or so detailed, if it's a famous quote that I can't get wrong, if it's a story I'm afraid that I'm going to forget to tell, then I put it on the slide. If it's that important, share it with everyone.
After you settle on the number of this is the Henry Peeves list, is not going in with a firm recommendation to the client.
Yes. No, so I've heard you say this before, and I actually meant to cover that. Here's the bonus, the BTS bit of the episode. So There is nothing that drives me crazier. You and I are 100% aligned on this. And here's why it happens, and here's why everybody needs to stop buying into their own BS. It happens because we think, well, we're in the service industry and it's the client's work and they get to say it. They get to decide. And the reason why we need to stop buying into that BS is because, again, we are the experts. Of course, the service industry, of course, they get say. But if somebody comes to my house and I have a leaky pipe and they go, there's 3 ways I can fix this. I can stick some chewing gum on it. It's going to cost you $2 and we can pray. I can get some duct tape. That's going to be, $100. You'll probably be good for 10 years, but at some point I may have to come back. Or for $450, I can replace that pipe for you and you'll never see me again. All right, well, what would you do in your house? I mean, for me, if I open up a wall, I don't ever want to have to do it twice. So I'm going to do the 451. Okay, that's fair. And I want that because the hell do I know? Maybe chewing gum is great at fixing leaks. I have no idea. I'm not a plumber.
So I think, and and it depends by personnel. I think some creative directors don't want to play favorites, which is again another one like with bringing too many ideas because you don't want to.
I see what you're saying.
And the other one is also a flaw in the creative director, that the creative director honestly doesn't know which of these is the best idea.
If I walk into a room and hey, Ben, we need you to present something. What are we talking? Like, what? If I only have time for one question, it's which of these ideas is our recommendation? Because nothing crushes the impact you had in a meeting faster than the client going, what would you guys pick? And you do this thing suddenly.
Okay,
right,
maybe
and then two people say 2 different ones at the same time.
Yeah, maybe I'm the odd duck out, but I've never made a presentation where I didn't have a recommendation. So, maybe.
Yeah. I mean, it's a pet peeve because it happens to me all the time. I'm like, why aren't we, and I try to diplomatically approach and it's tough, man. And, you go in, let's say you present 3 ideas, the client falls in love with one of them. We leave the meeting and the client and the creative director still trying to sell them something else.
Oh God.
And it's like, if you didn't, we sold,
leave.
Were you in the same,
Walk out.
were you in the same meeting that I was in? Like, we move on to the next thing now so that you don't complain that you're overworked and understaffed. Like, why are we trying to sell something that they didn't have an initial attraction to, especially if you didn't make it the recommendation?
Yeah. And again, if you're selling ideas, any of which you'd be happy to make, have a favorite, but any of them are acceptable. You'd sign your name to any of them. Then if they pick number 3, it's still good enough to sign your name to. You don't need to fall on your sword, ruin the long-term relationship, have the client second guess the quality of the work that they do want to make. It's incredible to me how many people fail to take yes for an answer.
What can I say? What can I say except coffee is for closers?
That coffee is for closers.
Coffee's for closers only.
Ben, we have to give a nod and a shout out to our friend Cameron Day, who called me the other day and said, we got to have you. So can you just remind us, we were talking about this before we hit record, how do you know Cam Day? And we want to, acknowledge him for bringing you to our attention.
I owe him a great debt of gratitude. Cam is a fantastic human, and he's one of those people that I've been lucky enough to meet in the comment section on LinkedIn. And we orbited around each other enough times that I think we got a sense of how one another think and speak. He said some very kind things about some posts that I put up and some rants that I went on. And I had a chance to read his series. He hasn't launched the 3rd one yet, but I am eagerly awaiting it, the Advertising Survival Guide series.
So are we.
And I was touched by how he put that together, because I think it addresses a certain look. Not everybody can learn from books, right? I can sit down and I can read a book, and as long as it's not too dry, I'll get through it. But I think that his series has done a phenomenal job of teaching you through stories, and of, even if you can't absorb a concrete lesson, you get to live through some of his experiences, and then he tells you, what he learned from it and what you should take away. And I've always said that, you learn more from mistakes than you do from successes. And if you are really smart, you can learn from other people's mistakes. And I think he's graciously opened his life and career in advertising to let us all learn from the mistakes that he's made. So it's a mutual admiration society.
Absolutely.
But I'm so pleased that you're giving him those props and that he reached out and made this happen in the first place.
Absolutely. So Ben Levy, former copywriter, creative director, and now the chief presenting guru at sellitgreat.com. Thank you for joining Henry and me on the Brief Brothers. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Thank
It was
you.
a pleasure, guys.
All right. Good stuff, Henry.
Good stuff, Howard.
He's Henry Gomez.
And he's Howard Eibach. And together we're the Brief Brothers. Till next time. Bye-bye.